Holocaust Memories Never Forget. A Gentile baby boomer's painful journey into the Shoah. Section 6. Brutalste Gewalt. Brutal Violence. Part 16. From the 1st of January 1943 until the end of the war, May 1945. One of the harshest and most brutal camps of them all, though rarely mentioned in most history books, was Janowska, located near the city of Lvov at the eastern border of Poland and Ukraine. By 1943, this camp was functioning as a combination internment, labor, transit, and concentration camp, and over 200,000 prisoners passed through it on their way to their deaths at Belzec and Treblinka. One survivor of this camp was the famous Nazi hunter Szymon Wiesenthal. Prisoners who weren't immediately sent to be gassed were used as slave laborers, many of whom worked inside an armament factory attached to the camp itself. Survivors described the brutality as so severe that if a prisoner even looked tired or sick, they were subject to being shot. Behind the camp was Piaski Ravine, where thousands of prisoners were tortured, executed, and buried. Researchers believe that at least 80,000 men, women, and children died there, mostly Jews, while the investigation by the Soviet Extraordinary Commission put that number at over 200,000. Eyewitnesses testified that death might be just around the corner because of the many forms of brutality that the SS officers and Ukrainian guards had perfected and used with impunity. Some of them enjoyed strangling women and children, while others walked around shooting prisoners in the back of the neck. Some forced prisoners into barrels of water during the winter and let them freeze to death. Others used steel rods to perforate a prisoner's body before watching them die. One particular guard hung prisoners by their feet until they were dead, while another enjoyed cutting young boys in half with an axe. Szymon Wiesenthal wrote about the camp's second-in-command, Lieutenant Gustav Wilhaus, who not only stood on the balcony of the camp office firing a machine gun at prisoners, he allegedly allowed his wife and daughter to witness this action. One very unique characteristic of the camp was the Janowska Orchestra, which was made up of many world-class instrumentalists. It was created by SS Major Richard Rokita, a not-so-talented violinist, one of the most sadistic officers at the camp, and according to witnesses, a deeply feared sexual predator. During executions, the orchestra had a standing order to assemble at any time, day or night, to play a piece entitled Tango of Death, and during tortures they had to play a foxtrot. If that wasn't enough, the camp commander often had them stand outside his window and play for hours at a time, and any instrumentalist who faltered in any way was given a severe beating. During the liquidation of Janowska concentration camp, some witnesses testified that all of the musicians were murdered while being forced to perform. As noted in an earlier part, a highly secret program began in May 1942 called Sonderaktion 1005, the purpose of which was to exhume and destroy 1 million or more decomposing bodies that the Nazis had buried in Poland, the Soviet Union, and other parts of Eastern Europe. A Sonderaktion 1005 labor battalion, which consisted of 100 or more slave laborers who were sometimes chained to each other, finally arrived at Janowska concentration camp to begin exhuming and burning bodies found in Piaski Ravine. A short time after the battalion's arrival, an order was issued to liquidate the entire camp. Because the death rate of all Sonderaktion laborers was so high, the SS forced the strongest and healthiest male prisoners at the camp to replace them or they would be shot right then. On the 19th of November, these same laborers revolted, and though most were immediately killed, a few managed to escape and survive the war. Following this uprising, at least 6,000 men, women, and children in the camp were executed, and their corpses thrown onto the piles of others waiting in Piaski Ravine to be incinerated. In reality, it was impossible for the Sonderaktion 1000 program to exhume and destroy all the bodies buried in Eastern Europe, and as swift-moving Soviet forces advanced toward Berlin, they uncovered large amounts of evidence proving the existence of Hitler's insane agenda of mass murder. Regarding the Soviet Union's so-called investigation into Nazi war crimes, it's important to note that they were also guilty of massacring hundreds of thousands of civilians during the war, which made their feigned outrage seem less about what the Germans had done and more about trying to convince their allies that they would never be guilty of committing such heinous acts. By this time, however, The Western leaders were already familiar with the Soviet Army's massacre of 20,000 or more Polish officers and intelligentsia in the spring of 1940 at Katyn.